If you just took your S5IIX out of the box, I'm going to show you how to set it up for video in 5 minutes so that you can get out and start shooting. Timer, go. Very first thing, make sure your top dial on the S5IIX is turned to movie mode, and that's going to give you the video settings in the menu. And I'm going to go to exposure mode. It might come in one of these auto settings. Set it to manual. That way you have full control over all the exposure settings on the S5IIX. Photo style, I'm going to keep at Vlog. That's going to give you the most dynamic range on the S5IIX, and it's going to give you the most cinematic image when it comes to shooting video. Dual native ISO settings, I keep mine at low, and that's going to give you the base ISO of 640. And the great thing, it's a dual native ISO camera, so you have a high frequency as well, and that is going to give you a base ISO of 4000. If you shoot a lot of low light, you might want to keep it around that range if you're doing weddings or events. I don't. I keep it at low. I like that base ISO at 640. Next thing I'm going to go into is the SS gain operation. I'm going to keep that at the shutter angle rather than the shutter speed, and what that's going to do is that's going to give me a shutter angle of 180. So whatever frame rate I'm shooting in, my shutter speed, my shutter angle is always going to be double whatever my frame rate is, which is a good rule of thumb when it comes to shooting video on any camera, is keeping your shutter speed double whatever your frame rate is. That shutter angle is going to do that automatically, so I don't even have to worry about it. Next is the record file format. So if you just take it out of your box, toss in the SD card, I recommend shooting in the MOV format, and that's going to give you a lot of these good record image quality settings that you have here. Some of them are going to be blacked out because those are super high megabit per second write speeds, and you're going to need an SSD drive to record to through the USB-C. So we'll get into that in just a little bit, but MOV might be a good way to start on that SD card. Focus settings, we're going to set it to the detecting subject is going to be human, and then we're going to go back to continuous autofocus. We're going to keep that at mode 2. Continuous autofocus works all the time, and according to LUMIX, that's going to be your best setting when it comes to the autofocus. Full area human detection, and I just get to that right here on this button right there. So I'm going to go back to the menu, and we're going to go to some of the audio settings. I keep mine around -12. Sometimes I take it down to -18 depending on the situation, and if I don't want a lot of noise in there, I'll take it down to -18. Usually I keep it around -12, and I get some pretty good audio levels, especially with the limiter on. Very next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into the ISO increments, and we're going to set the increments to 1/3. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow your ISO settings, when you go in here and adjust your ISO, it's going to take it up by 1/3 rather than like big jumps. It's going to incrementally take it up by 1/3. That way you have a little bit more control over those ISO settings. Next thing that we're going to go to is the monitor display, and I'm going to put the photo grid line on. I'm going to keep that at 1/3, and what that does is that gives me this rule of thirds grid line that I can kind of base my shots off of. Especially if I'm shooting interviews, I like keeping people on those areas of thirds right there. So I have that on. Now, next thing I'm going to do is sometimes I put on the histogram, and that just kind of gives me an overall exposure idea of where the image is. I don't keep it on all the time. One of the things I would prefer to use is the waveform, which we'll get to here in just a sec. The next thing that I'm going to do is turn on Vlog View Assist, and that's going to be the Rec 709 look. So when I am shooting in Vlog, it's going to be a flat image. This View Assist is going to give me the actual Rec 709 convert look on there when I go to actually, monitor my image. Next thing I'm going to do is, maybe shortcut to my waveform, and that's going to kind of give me, especially if I'm using a gray card, I can see where that gray card is, and I can correctly get my exposure. So this is the waveform, and you can set it on your screen and then set up one of these shortcuts, one of these buttons as a shortcut to pop it on, pop it off whenever you need to. Red record frame indicator. Make sure that is on, because when you hit the record button on your S5IIX, That's going to give you that red box around that monitor, and that is going to help you notice when you're recording. If you're new here, my name is Caleb, and I got a ton of content about Lumix cameras like the S5IIX, S5 II, GH6, GH5. That's something you're interested in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications so that you don't miss when new videos come out. Now here's a few bonus settings that are not part of that initial 5-minute setup, but might come in handy whenever you start shooting video with the S5IIX. The very first one is going to be this photo style real-time LUT. You can shoot with a baked-in image, one of your favorite LUTs that you have. If you want that look right out of camera and don't have to worry about editing it that way, you can just shoot with that look right from the camera and get that. And to upload your favorite LUT, you just go to this gear, LUT library, set, you can load it right there, and then you can go back to the LUT and select the LUT that you put in there. I don't have any on here right now because I mostly shoot in the vlog anyway and just edit later on, but that's where you would put that right there. If you do a lot of shooting for social media, you might want to turn your frame marker on, and you can set it to a 9:16. I have my frame color green, and so that's going to actually be the vertical look on there, and so I can turn that on. And now when I go back to the monitor view, it's going to give me that vertical outline, that green vertical outline that's going to allow me to frame up vertically. And it's great if you do a lot of social media vertical shooting. Now, if you're recording with HDMI, this is where you're going to find the record output. And you can turn your info on if you're doing any screen recordings or anything like that. Sound output, anything there. Make sure you have your HDMI plugged in to your monitor that you're able to record to, and that's where you'll find that information. So in this wrench right here is where you find the card format. Make sure you get all of your files off of your SD card before you format it, and then to basically erase the card and format it again for video shooting, you hit that card format, and this is where you're also going to turn on USB SSD recording. So if you have a drive like this that you're going to record to, make sure you plug that into the USB port and then turn on USB SSD recording, and you can also format that as well here. And then the final stage, you can set up your custom menu here, where really this would be like a fast menu for you. And so you can set all your shortcuts up here. You don't have to worry about shuffling through all the different settings. Your favorite settings you can put right here, and you have quick access to them. Let me know in the comments any settings that you've been using on the S5IIX that might come in handy for somebody else. And I know that I mentioned SSD recording on the S5IIX. I do have a love-hate relationship with SSD recording. Check out the video that's popping up right here to find out why.